Islam, Islam, Morris. Um, I want to get into these lessons right now because they are they have to be in the right contemporary part. Something happened to my live feed. Okay, they just cut it off on me. I don't know what's going on. They just cut it off on me, and they cut it off on me because I was getting ready to get in here and drop some facts. But Allah is willing. All right. So we're gonna try this thing all over again. I am nobleman, Menelik, Allah, Al Rahim, Brown, L Bay. Okay. Now we finna go ahead and get with it. He frameth his statute with equality and wisdom. His subjects enjoy the fruits of their labor and security in their happiness, right? Consistent of the observance of the law, Moors. Now, I want to give honor to our illustrious prophet, Noble Drew Ali, and I want to go ahead and get back into this information. Now, when we had left off, right, right, we was talking and discussing about the converts, okay, sought by the Mohammedans, right? So we're gonna get into this, okay? Now, okay, involved in shaping the Canaanite temple, his presence has not been documented in any sources related to the organization, right? But like we said before, the prophet headed that organization, and Suleiman tried to put a fatah on the prophet, because all of them was in masonry, and the prophet was revealing all the secrets because that was his whole plan, was to reveal the secrets and to let Moors be who they are out in the open. Why y'all in the lodge? Why y'all taking oaths and holding secrets? Why, when this is your land? This is this is who you are, you Moors. So you do everything out in the open. Masonry was Moorish custom. It was a Moorish way of life. Okay. So for us to prepare our Muslim sons, to run government and stuff like that, they had to be introduced to Masonry. Okay. Now, we finna get into this, right? Now, the converts sought by Mohammedans make special drive among Moors of the United States of America. Dr. Abdul Hamid Suleiman, a native of Arabia, of 143rd West, 130th Street, Manhattan. He was the high priest of Mecca. Okay, so that's that's back in the day. They still had establishments when Moors were still ruling. Okay, before the contemporary of the United States Corporation. All right. Now, for a number of years, has inaugurated a movement for spreading Mohammedanism, right? Because that's the Moorish way. That's the Moorish custom. We spreading Mohammedanism, the correct, true, okay, not Muslim, but Mohammedanism. That goes with Islamism. Okay, so among the Negroes, right, the so-called Negroes, because we already know that Negro title was put upon Moors. Okay, so of the United States, a number of Muslim groups have been started. Okay, particularly one in Newark, New Jersey, under the name of the Canaanite Temple. So they had other organizations too, but one of those organizations was the Canaanite Temple that the Prophet was heading with Suleiman. Okay, now under their leadership. See, this says under their leadership, the temple it is reported to has attracted a large membership group of Moors Muslims have combined with the Turkish and Syrian groups throughout the United States of America. Dr. Suleiman has gathered together these groups with the Turkish and Syrian groups in this country, and they have decided to erect a mosque in the northern part of Manhattan, right? Island, under the leadership of Dr. Suleiman, and there will be a movement conducted among the Moorish people throughout the United States of America to convert them to Mohammedanism, right? Now, we have to worry about the article discussing the early Canaanite temple, right? In an article from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle on July 15, 1923, the Canaanites, right? Newark of the Canaanite temples of Newark, New Jersey, was a tribute to Dr. Suleiman. Drew Ali's involvement with the temple has been reported only in oral histories, while the spelling, right, in this report does not match other historic documents on the Canaanite temple because they swapped everything up. And that's why it was a whole problem with the Canaanite temple because you had people didn't like how the prophet was bringing certain things, so they tried to stop the prophet. But Allah's divine intervention in your movements and whatever you're doing is divine because you can't stop what Allah already has decreed. Okay, so now they're saying in an article from the Brooklyn. Well, I already read that. Now, the Temple of New Jersey was attributed to Dr. Suleiman. Drew Ali's involvement with the temple has been reported only in oral histories, while the spelling, right, reports in this report does not match other historical documents on the Canaanite temple. The Associated Press often printed typos and spellings and punctuation errors. The article does not mention Drew Ali on only Dr. Suleiman because they probably tried to, you know, s- doctrine up the doctrine and change everything that the prophet had put forth. They wanted to change everything. Okay. So within that time, they changed the history. They changed they changed the history, but the oral statements were still there. So if they changed the history and put it how they wanted to put it, then yeah, the prophet didn't bring that. The prophet didn't bring this. Okay. Because they did this after the fact. Okay. When he was running around here, they did not say those things. All right. Now, and now involvement with the temple has been reported in oral histories while the spelling in this report does not match. Okay. It says it does not match any match other historical documents on the Canaanite temple. The Associated Press often printed typos in spelling and pronunciation errors. The article does not mention Drew Ali, only Dr. Suleiman. Bowen cited the activities of the Mecca Medina temple as early as 1910 and posted Suleiman possible involvement with that group. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle article states that this Suleiman was the leader of the Canaanite temple with other Muslim groups, and he was the high priest of Mecca for a number of years. It also announced that he has inaugurated a new movement, right? So, while members of the MSTA contended that Noble Drew Ali was the leader of the Canaanite temple as early as 1913, the 1923 newspaper article introduced Dr. Suleiman as the leader and suggested that this was a newly found movement. Yet the article also indicates Suleiman was not the only one behind the temple's organizing activities and makes reference to multiple Muslim groups. organizing at the time. It states under their leadership, the temple, it is reported, has attracted a large membership. So, in actuality, let's say Noble Drew Ali, Suleiman, and some more Moors were there erecting that temple. Okay, because anything else would be a lie. Okay, and they don't want to give the prophet his due flowers because what he did was amazing. He came here to bring us our nationality, and we still are running around here in a slumber state and don't know exactly what the prophet had done for us. So that's why we're here to clear up all the misconceptions. Okay, Morris? Now, it says it is reported has attracted a large membership. The use of the word there instead of his suggests that while Dr. Suleiman headed the Canaanite temple in 1923, there were others involved in its development as well. Given Drew Ali's alleged affiliation with the Canaanite temple earlier, this suggests that Suleiman may have taken over the group by 1923. Okay, so and by 1924, Noble Drew Ali had no formal affiliation with the Canaanite Temple in the state of New Jersey. The Moorish Science Temple has made available a document indicating that the Canaanite Temple was established on 24th of May 1924 by George Collins, W.J. Brown, Walter Crawford, Joseph A. Grant, Fred Mason, Willie J. Turner, and Samuel J. Dickinson. The document states that the purpose of the organization was religious worship and teaching of religion, Muslim of Islam, Islam the relief and support of such members thereof, such and other persons as shall be by reason of sickness, right? Casualty, old age, or other cause by rendered unable to attend their usual occupations, or calling to promote the interests of deceased members of said corporation. Also to pay a death benefit according to the bylaws and constitution. It also cited the location of the principal office as number 102 Morton Street, Newark, New Jersey, in the county of Essex and the state of New Jersey, and named the agent therein and in charge as Jacob French, right? The document also named the trustees for the cooperation, corporation for the first year. The signers of original document: George Collins, Samuel Dixon, W.J. Brown, Walter Crawford, Joseph A. Grant, Willie J. Turner, and Fred Mason. Noble Drew Ali was not involved in any way. Therefore, the Canaanite Temple became an official corporate enterprise in New Jersey in late May 1924. It also reveals that within the corporation first year, Drew Ali was not one of the named trustees, but neither was Abdul Hamid Suleiman, thus complicating connections to the Canaanite temple because they cooped it. Okay? They cooped that temple. That's why everything that the prophet did, they came behind him and changed it. All right? Foundation documents of the MSTA. In the Moorish leader's historical message to America, Noble Drew Ali counted the history of the MSTA, stating that we organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year of 1925 and were legally incorporated as a civic organization under the laws of the state of Illinois. November 29th, 1926. Later, in May 1928, the name was changed to Moorish Science Temple of America in accordance with the legal requirements of the Secretary of the State of Illinois. The initial aim of the organization, according to the foundational document, was to uplift fallen humanity and teach those things necessary to make men and women become better citizens. Yet by 1928, the mission of the movement had decisively changed to place emphasis on its religious mission to propagate the faith and extend the learning and truth of the great prophet of Ali to America and consecrate missionaries of the prophet and to establish the faith of Muhammad in America. The second affidavit for the organization filed in Cook County in Illinois has figured uh, prominently in MSTA's leaders' authority and legitimacy. This is evident in the multiple places that the document is cited and reprinted. The founding documents of the MSTA are mentioned by Noble Drew Ali in the monthly publication Moorish Guide, including the Moorish letter. The Moorish leaders' historical message to America. More prom- um, predominantly, a vision of the 1928 document is printed on the back of the Quran Questions for Moorish Americans, a small pamphlet given to members of the movement, also referred to as the 101s, to instruct them in MSTA's um, beliefs and practices and culture and Moorish science pr- practices. The 1928 affidavit of incorporation is central to explaining the dispute among the splinter groups in the Moorish science. In the 1940s, these fractional groups began filling papers of incorporation in states beyond Illinois and utilizing the MSTA's name as well as some of the same language at incorporation. So you had these Moors going in, doing things, and being incorporated and splitting the group up, okay, and not sticking to the things that the prophet brought. They was doing their own thing, reincarnated prophets and all this old crazy stuff, right? All right, so that's what was going on, okay, and name as well some of the same language as incorporation in MSTA's 1928 affidavit has been especially significant in establishing the original authority of Chicago's Temple Number One, which lost some of its power with the secession of C. Kirkman Bay, the traitor. He reestablished the MSTA as the Moorish Science Temple of America, Inc., and served as the supreme grand moderator and advisor of the group from 1929 to 1959. Most of the information we have about Moorish Science has been produced by the C. Kirkman Bay. That's the damn fraud. That's the putting all the potentate and visor in there. You see what I'm saying? Which we just sheiks and grand sheiks. We got all that in there for. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's still our culture. But C. Kirkman Bay is the smelly culprit. Okay. Now, factions of Moorish science, including many of the documents deposited in the main MSTA archive at the Stromberg Center for Research in Moorish Culture in New York City. Therefore, the historical documents collected by Edward Millie L. and his descendants in Chicago shed new light on the formation of the MSTA. So Millie L., the one that been fighting against these dirty Moors, and the one that the prophet left him in charge. You see what I'm saying? This is what he had to go against and fight against with all these dirty Moors trying to usurp what the prophet brought. Okay? Now it says MSTA and home rule in Cook County. Moorish Science Incorporation in Cook County, Illinois, is especially significant because it is one of the few counties in the state that has established home rule. Home rule, in the case of Moorish Science, grants the organization the right to govern its own affairs as long as these actions are in accordance with the state constitution and general laws. Home rule adds some level of coordination between the state and local levels. What? What? And local levels, while allowing the local organization to deal with its own affairs without state approval. So that means that the state apparatus, they don't have nothing to do with Moorish affairs, just like I've been saying for years. This proof. Okay. Now, this has been interpreted by the followers of Moorish science as an effort by Noble Drew Ali to create a nation within a nation. In Moorish literature, this has been interpreted as giving the MSCA a free national standing, something established by the use of authority, our prophets' authority, and cannot be controlled, influenced, or changed by another nation. The MSTA, as a legally incorporated religious body politic in Cook County, therefore has specific jurisdictional rights and gave the group founders and those appointed afforded authority according to the general laws of the corporation through the political authority granted to the grand body. The organization's central leadership in the 1928 filling with Cook County, the MSTA members and leaders continued to urge a program of unity under the corporate authority of the original temple. Number one's leadership. The granting of charters since the time of the prophet has been one of the main ways MSTA leaders have tried to institutionalize, okay, the recognition of the main temple, number one, and grant validity to the subsequent temples opening in various cities, counties, and states according to the current followers of Moorish science. This allows them to function under the jurisdiction of the Grand Major Temple in various states, with the granted authority of what was established by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, right, on 8/1, 1928, as a religious corporation with branches throughout the nation. The call for unity has been consistent theme in Moorish science from its inception. The founding documents, including the Constitution and bylaws, subsequent general laws, and Supreme Grant Council, were created under the authority of the MSTA in Chicago and assisted to maintain its political and religious authority. By 18th of October 1928, Noble Drew Ali certified his leadership by assigning members to the Supreme Grand Council and creating the supreme laws, the divine constitution and bylaws. On 31st of August 1927, the MSTA members traveled to the future site of their temple on the corner of 37th and Federal Street in Chicago. They congregated together to celebrate the success of their movement, which 9 months earlier and been officially incorporated in the state of Illinois. Over 100 self proclaimed Moorish American citizens of the United States posed for a photograph that have documented their allegiance to the Holy Temple, which sought to uplift fallen humanity by teaching their people their nationality and the divine creed, that they may know that they are part and parcel of the said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians. A few months following their pilgrimage to the corner of 37th and Federal Street, the temple's divine constitution and laws were drafted. The constitution lasted and listed the home office 3 blocks east of the future site of the temple at 3140 Indian Avenue, and named Noble Drew Ali as the founder of the group. In the Constitution, there were 7 articles which provided followers with the basic guidelines and goals of of the movement. In addition, there was the Moorish American prayer. The prayer called out to Allah and Noble Drew Ali for divine guidance. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my God, my salvation, and my protection by night and by day through his holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, Amin, and Islam. The Moorish American prayer provided its followers with a post revised version of the well-known Bible verse. Psalms 27:1, which state, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, so why should I fear? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger, so why should I tremble?" Through this prayer, adherents to Moorish science could worship the divine in a way that was both familiar and new, by using the Arabic name of God Allah and affirming that He was the same Father of the universe. MSTA initiates were able to convert their Christian religions ideas into the new Islamic belief system. Through this conversion, Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science movement sought to free the followers from the history of U.S. bullcrap slavery that was put upon the mentality of Moors here in the so-called Americas, which we know is Morocco, which we know is Al-Qubalon, okay? Which we know is all of the diaspora that the Moors was in. We know that. We know this is a maxim. We know that. So the prophet came to redeem Moors out of the Negro mentality. Okay? Now, and racial discrimination by affirming their free national name, Moorish Americans. The members made themselves new, right? Drew Ali assured his followers that the adoption of this new nationality would enable them to be fully accepted as American citizens. The laws included in the Constitution range from general instructions to the leadership and members to specific details about the purpose of Moorish science. Act 1 described the power of the Grand Sheikh and the chairman of the temple to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body. The leaders needed to live according to the five principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. The second act discussed the religious services in the temple, stating that Friday is the holy day of Moorish science and that all of the meanings are to be open and close accordingly to the circle seven in love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Act 3 reaffirmed the five principles, insisting that all members proclaim and practice them. In this third act, there were also a provision that no member should falsely accuse or put in danger their brother or sister. Act 4 told members to abide by the divine laws and the laws of the government, because by being a Moorish American, you are part and parcel of the government and must live life accordingly. The emphasis on upright, right? The emphasis on upright citizenship was reinforced in the fifth act, which stated the organization of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is not to cause any confusion, to overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government. So, why would these Moors be trying to make another state or another Moorish government when there's a nation inside a nation? And that's why you will have two seals on a dollar bill. The two seals on a dollar bill, that's two, that represents two nations. That represent the Moorish nation and that represent the European nation. Okay, the modern European nation. All right. So, and when you hear these Moors keep talking about a UN, talking about a consular notification, talking about, oh, you got to be a United States citizen, all them Moors are traitors. And the prophet said, be careful, dear Moors. Moors wearing turbans and fezzes will try to enslave you. Okay? So that's why everything that's going up in this day and time has to be researched, has to be really looked upon by the Moor himself, and so he can get his own perspective, because you cannot believe what you've been told. All right? You have to go do your own due diligence. Islam? Islam. So now you have to must live life accordingly. The emphasis on upright citizenship was reinforced in the fifth act, which stated the organization of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is not to cause confusion or to overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government, but to obey hereby. It is clear from the first five acts of the divine constitution that Moorish science was developed in accordance with the laws of the United States of America and was not intended to challenge them. The last two laws were to instruct members of Moorish science in the obligations, responsibilities, and duties of their new nationality. The members identify as Moorish Americans was emphasized in Act 6. The document explained the need to teach people their nationality because they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live. Through the acknowledgement of the Moorish nationality, the members were able to distance themselves from the institution of United States corporation slavery. One of the ways members of Moorish science were able to reclaim their Moorish heritage was by discarding the slave past. Noble Drew Ali was sent by Allah to teach his people their true nationality and to redeem them from their sinful ways. This was only possible by teaching them their true history. Okay, Moors? Now, in connection to Allah, the last line of the act taught followers that they were descendants of the ancient Moabites, who, according to Ali, according to Ali, inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Okay, the connection to the past as Moabites who settled on Africa shores placed the followers in Africa, free from United States corporation slavery. okay, and one that included a biblical reference, okay, because the prophet already knew we wasn't slaves. He came to redeem us out of mental slavery, what the modern Europeans had concocted and placed upon our persons, okay, with Ingus Legis, okay, and Civil Letter Martus, okay. They already knew we wouldn't have no standing in law. So the prophet came back to redeem us, okay. Now, the seventh and final act, the divine constitution and laws, declared that all members must perform the prescribed duties of Moorish science. The religious service of MSTA were called meetings. All meetings were required to arrive. All their meetings promptly pay their dues, and engage in all of the necessary actions required of faithful Moors. For men and women, their roles were described through their duties as husbands and wives. Husbands must provide for their wives and children, while women must care for their children and homes and obey their husbands. Sons and daughters were also specifically addressed and told to be obedient to their parents, be industrious, and become a part of the uplifting of fallen humanity. This most likely meant that they were also to join the MSTA and adhere to its laws. All Moorish Americans were instructed to maintain pure hearts and minds filled with love and to keep their bodies clean. These acts were referred to as the divine covenant from the holy prophet Noble Drew Ali through guidance of his father, God Allah. The divine constitution not only acted as the covenant with the prophet and Allah, but also foreshadowed the teachings in the Circle 7 Quran, the sacred text of the movement, right? Through these documents, members of the MSTA were given clear guidelines and expectations of their obligations and responsibility as members, right? The divine constitution, along with Circle 7 Quran, provided the followers with information they could take home and use in study groups to better understand the MSTA theology. As followers of Moorish science, there was a strong emphasis on personal behavior and adherence to MSTA laws and principles. Once MSTA members understood their true history and the divine creed, it was their obligation not only to themselves but to others in their communities to conduct themselves with the uttermost integrity and respect. Indeed, right? The subsequent creation of the Supreme Grand Council and new supreme laws function to push forward the MSTA agenda to uplift all humanity and ensure that members were acting in accordance with the divine plan put into place by Noble Drew Ali. Love for humanity was the solution that would help to uplift fallen humanity. Drew Ali declared that humanity must be lifted from the unwholesome depths of poverty, misery, and suffering and placed on the solid rock of salvation. The MSCA was Drew Ali's, Noble Drew Ali's way of helping his people out of these conditions and bringing them to a higher state of being, right? So, the mystery from the Moorish Science Temple, right? Moors in America, alternative, right? Spirituality in the 1920s, Chicago, religion and American culture. So, in the American culture, when the prophet was running around, okay, all these Moors that are saying that the prophet didn't teach civics, the prophet didn't teach nationality, right? Okay, and the prophet didn't teach you how to protect yourself and defend the Constitution and evoke the Constitution when these people are going outside of their scope. Okay. Now, when you have these people talking about, oh, we're gonna go and get a chair at the UN, all of y'all are being fraudulent adherents to these modern Europeans, which they cannot get in or join our affairs. Only the affairs that can be conducted through us is our affairs. They cannot be a part of our affairs, right? So when these Moors keep talking about, oh, you got to be a United States citizen and pay your taxes, that's treason because the prophet separated us from them. Okay, so we can be self autonomy and self government, right? Now, these people are liars, and what they do is to lie and then try to come up with some type of distraction, right? Now, I'm going to tell you this right here from an example, right, of this is found in the FBI files for the Moorish Science Temple of America, part 3 of 31, right? HTTP vault/vault FBI dot government slash Moorish percent 20% science, 20% temple, 20% of American, right, and 20% of America Moorish science, um, temple, right. Then it says, and then you have to all the way up to 2020 part to 2023 to all the way to 2031 review access December 12, 2013. This document states that on September 9th, 1942, informant advised that this organization was incorporated on March 17, right, 1940, at which time they set forth the following purpose: to teach the Quran of Muhammad, to teach, preach, and live the religion of Islam, to propagate the faith of Islam, and extend its learnings, and also the learnings of the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, to appoint, consecrate missionaries to the Prophet, and to establish the faith of Muhammad in America, and to confer into the Muslim faith by annexing the descendant names of Ali, El, and Bey. See, that's lies. They mixing and scratching. The Prophet already set that up. Okay, so why are they reconsecrating in 1942? Because that's the dirty Moor stuff. Okay, that's the religious stuff. That's they taking the civics out. All right. Now, now we have a quote. It says, um, see their website for more information, right? From the group about their leader, the Chicago defender in 1930, cited Edward Millie L., Drew Ali's Grand Sheik. Okay, that's who the Prophet appointed. He did not appoint C. Kirkman Bey. That is the fraud. Okay, he did not. He did not appoint him. And all these um prophets, all these re reincarnated prophets. And then we got the dirty stuff that, you know, Elijah Poole Bay and Wally Fordell did. Okay, and then we got, you know, you know, C. Kirkman Bay. See what I'm saying? What he did. Now, and all of them are sellouts. So it says right here, as the one who was running operations of the temple after Ali's death, okay, Moore's trials blows up. Sick juror and Allah calls the three Moors to get new hearings. Sixth juror causes mistrial, right? Right? Defender February 15, 1930. David Bailey L., you are now watching the Moorish Science Temple of America. It is not a 501c3. So this was the time when they started converting the temples into the 501c3s. They are not that. So if a temple is up under a 501c3, he's treasonous. Okay? It says it right here. David Bailey L., you are now watching the Moorish Science Temple of America is not a 501c3 from internal literature of the MSTA. So what he is saying is that these 501c incorporated temples are not the real temples. Period. And they've been cooped by C. Kirkman Bay. Period. Now everybody who's following him up under the 501c, no, 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 no. Okay? So, quote is from. Now we're gonna go into quote is from an internal email communication between contemporary members of the Moorish Science Temple, right? Of America, February 12th, 2013. Act 6, Divine Constitution and Laws. first printed sometime in October of November of 1927. Psalms 27 on 1, New Living Translation, Noble Drew Ali, Divine Constitution and Laws, private collection, right? Act 6, Divine Constitutional and Bylaws, right? Ibid, Noble Drew Ali, the Holy Quran of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Circle 7 Quran, expanded on this historical connection. Chapter chapter 20, let me see. Yeah, chapter 20, the divine origin of the Asiatic nation, right? Explained that the Moorish were the ancient Moabites, like the Moors were the ancient Moabites and founders of Mecca. Chapter chapter 37, Egypt, the capital empire of the Dominion of Africa. No, that's chapter 47, my bad. Capital empire of the Dominion of Africa stated that the inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the first inhabitants of Africa. So Moors were the first inhabitants of Africa, Al Cubalan, Ethiopia. We was the first to inhabit that land. Okay? And who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family was second. Then came the word Ethiopia, which means the demarcation line of the dominion of Amexem, the first true and divine name of Africa, the dividing of the land between the father and the son, the Moabites from the land of Moab, who received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle and inhabit northwest Africa. They were the founders and are the true possessors of the present Moroccan Empire, with their Canaanite, Hittite, and Amorite brethren who sojourned from the land of Canaan, seeking new homes, right? Noble Drew Ali, Divine Constitution and Laws, Act 7, right? Noble Drew Ali, Savior of Humanity, Moorish Literature, Chicago, Moorish Science Temple of America. Dated, well, American Ink, no date. Okay, so we got, okay, one God, one aim, one destiny, Garveyism, and the formation of African, right, American Islam. In 1909, after completing 2 years of education at Alcorn College in Mississippi, right, Edward Milley, right, future Supreme Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America, right, MSTA, made his way north to Chicago, Illinois. Once in the city, Milley joined the famous Olivet Baptist Church, pursuing his desire for church service as an active, right, participant in the congregation and sparking his interest in the plight of his fellow Moors, American migrants in the city. The more advancement sermons of the Reverend Lacey Cook Williams undoubtedly influenced Millie's race consciousness because Reverend Williams famously advocated the responsibility of the church in assimilating rural migrants into modern city life. By the end of the World War I, Millie had expressed his interest in the cause Afrik, Afaric by joining Marcus Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association UNIA in Chicago, the training he had received at Alcorn College, and through his experiences at Oliver made Millie ripe for Garveyism. It was in the UNIA that Millie, right, like many other future Muslims, was exposed to the transformative power of Islam and a political doctrine firmly committed to the redemption of Moors from European colonialism. Right? Right? So we have to worry about that. Now, Now Marcus Garvey, UNIA, planted itself on American soil in 1917 in the center of Harlem in New York City and served as the speed bed for a number of Moorish Americans, right? Movements for self determination in the first half of the 20th century. Among these, right, various movements were a number of religious organizations, including the Moorish Science Temple of America, founded by Noble Drew Ali in 1925. The UNIA itself was imbued with rich religious symbolism and language, yet beyond its endorsement of the African Orthodox Church headed by George Alexander McGuire, Garvey did not, right, advocate for any specific religion. Instead, the UNIA was feudal ground for flexible interpretation of race, history, and religion, resulting in a multitude of more social organizations inspired by Garveyism. Indeed, the diversity of religious movements that flowed out of Garveyism demonstrated the um the fluidity of religious exchange present in the movement. Despite this rich and diverse cultural landscape, we know very little about the Islamic presence among the rank and file Garveyites. In an attempt to reconstruct the history of early Islamic organizations activities among Moorish Americans, I argue that Garveyism served as a significant conduit in the organization of Moorish American Islamic movements of the early 20th century. The Islamic organizations that were ultimately inspired by Garveyism, such as the Moorish Science Temple of America in the 1920s, were inherently imbued with race consciousness. And in the case of Moorish science, the leadership sought to recreate racial meaning through a link to both Islam and Garveyism. God and Garveyism. Garvey was influenced greatly in his youth by Christianity, which undeniably, right, affected his personal religious belief throughout his lifetime. Garvey introduced, right, Methodism as a boy, was tainted by his experience with so-called white racism from modern Europeans, while in his teens, when a close friend of Garvey's and the daughter of a modern European Methodist preacher was sent away to Europe and instructed to serve all contracts with Garvey. This experience taught Garvey an early lesson about the way the world worked, even among those of the cloth. Despite this exposure to the the hypocrisy and the racial distinctions practiced by many modern Europeans, some Christians, Garvey remained a steadfast believer in Christianity and continued to establish friendship with modern European whites. As a young man, Garvey converted to Roman Catholicism, yet he maintained political relations with a number of religious leaders of all denominations and faiths, perhaps because Garvey's own conversion to Catholicism and experiences with Methodism, his interpretation of faith and spirituality was fluid and had a discernible impact on his political thought and ideologies. Indeed, one of the most successful aspects of Garvey's version or vision for a united Africa was his reliance on biblical language, symbolism, and the establishment of religiously styled UNIA meanings and programs. Garvey's experience with oriented publishing and periodicals, including the development of a number of his own newspapers, coupled with his religious, right, background, prepared Garvey to access what historian Richard Brent Turner referred to as the tremendous religiosity of the black masses, and thus he connected the redemption of Africa. So We already know he connected Moors, right, and the redemption of Africa with the mystical rebirth of the human race. This focused on the need for the unification not only of scattered bodies, but also the mind and spirit of the people of what? Moorish descent. And this allowed Garvey to utilize familiar religious language to convey a new faith, Garveyism. Look beyond the religious denominations or variations in faith and spoke to Christian, Muslim, and Jew alike, especially faith in the universal brotherhood of man. At the same time, it was Garvey's time spent in Europe that helped him sharpen his vision and give him the language needed to unite those of Moorish descent scattered across the globe. Now, he used African because he knew African belonged to the Moors. So African panism, right? When they say, "Oh, I'm panism," you know what I mean? African panism. Well, it was a Moor that was behind that. Deuce Muhammad Ali. You see what I'm saying? Because that whole thing was he was using the indoctrinated re indoctrinated process of Negroes, blacks, coloreds, Africa and all that to unite all Moors and then teach them the truth about their heritage, their culture. You see what I'm saying? Because he was like, the forerunner. You know what I mean? John the Baptist. So, and the prophet knew this. So they worked together. But you had WD the Boss running around and all the mulattoes that was treated unfairly back in the days because if you had any type of mixed um ancestry, your rights wasn't all the way afforded to you. You had to be a full-blooded Moor to have all your rights. If you wasn't a full-blooded Moor, you only had civil rights. Okay, and yeah, I'm gonna drop another a lesson on that. But let's get back into this across the globe. So in 1912, soon after returning to Jamaica from working and traveling throughout Central America, one thing became clear to Garvey. Okay, the need for unification and the need for improvement. Right, right. In Central America. Okay, so the conditions for the people of Moorish descent. Garvey then decided to travel in late June and early July 1913 to London, the imperial metropolis, where his younger sister, Indiana, was employed as a governess for the daughters of an influential Roman Catholic family. So his sister was a governess, right, in England. That's why a lot of Moors went over there. You see what I'm saying? Because America was only the ones on that bull crap. Like all other countries, you know what I mean, like Germany and stuff like that, they still uphold the Moor there. They still have statues and stuff up there of Moors. They haven't changed, you see what I'm saying, anything of the history. Just like Russia didn't change the history. But America and these deviant as modern Europeans changed everything. Now let's get back into this. Now, while in London, Garvey met and worked for Deuce Muhammad Ali, an Egyptian native and editor of the African Times and Orient Review, a pan African journal. Okay? Their acquaintance lasted for over 2 decades. While working on the African Times and Orient Review, Garvey published an article in the October 1913 issue entitled "The British West Indies: In the Mirror of Civilization History Making by Colonial Negroes." See, now we already know the contemporary history with Britain, British, and Morocco. Okay, that was all Moors. So I'm saying, so if you are being indoctrinated by history that was a methodology, right? Okay, it's an ideology that these people have taken from took your history, and then they made a concept and methodology for themselves, and then traded places with you. Okay, so now we have to remember in this article, while working on the British West Indies in the mirror of right civilization history making by colonial so-called Negroes, in this article, which we know are Moors, in this article, Garvey foreshadowed his future place as the Moorish Moses of his people by predicting the liberation of Jamaica from the British crown. Okay, as one who knows the people well, I make no apology for prophesizing that there will soon be a turning point in the history of the West Indies, and that the people who inhabited that portion of the land, the West Hemisphere, will be the instruments of uniting a scattered race who before the close of many centuries will found an empire on which the sun shall shine as ceaselessly as it shines on the empire of the north today. So that's the Moroccan Empire, okay? Which Morocco, okay, recognized United States of America, because the United States of America wasn't even formed. So where the United States of America used the land to form at, right here in Morocco, and then they started calling Morocco United States of America, which is in Africa, which is the northwest of Mexum, the North Gate. Okay, now Garvey would eventually gain a great number of followers and would see himself as the rightful ruler of the United of a united Africa. In the final paragraph of this essay, Garvey revealed an incoherent version of his developing ideology and predicted as surely as there is an what evolution in the natural growth of man and nations, so surely will there be a change in the history of these subjected regions. Subsequently, Garvey traveled throughout Europe, right? Making the connections that would be needed to forge unity among the people of Moorish descent. Okay. While in Europe, Garvey came in contact with the Brotherhood movement, also known as Pleasant Sunday Afternoon, an organization that emerged in Great Britain in 1875 among Anglican and nonconformist men. It quickly spread to Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and within 40 years had amassed a membership of approximately 750,000. Through this organization, men of all social classes applied Christian precepts to the problems of child labor, pensions, labor conditions, housing, and other social issues. The sense of fraternity found in the brotherhood movement undoubtedly had an impact on Garvey, who was in the Europe at its height. Historian Robert Hill argued that from the inception of the UNIA, Garvey conscripted the concept of universal brotherhood at the same time that he rescripted it to provide the rationale behind the goal of um, more self organization. You know what I mean? And you ultimately the rationale of so-called black self-determination. It seems that in addition to Garvey's relationship with the region in his early years, his time in Europe reinforced his faith in the idea of brotherhood and the possibilities of the social gospel, right? Uniting men across religious and class divisions, Garvey would use the lessons he learned while in Europe to his advantage. Robert Hill observed It was under the banner of Universal Brotherhood that the UNIA entered the Jamaican public sphere in 1914 in preaching the doctrine of brotherhood. Garvey was able to demonstrate that he adhered to the civic virtues essential to the preservation of the colonial regime, namely the gospel of imperial benevolence and social cohesion and control within the colony. Further, the doctrine of brotherhood confirmed Garvey's claim to Christian piety. So these guys were well studied within the Constitution and civics of the laws, right? And they had a movement that, you know, um, generated a whole following. Okay, it was a lot of clandestine people that was in back in the day trying to stop the movement, trying to stop it on its head. But we're here now, okay? And all the things that these people say that the prophet didn't bring, hmm, he actually brought. You know what I mean? So we're gonna keep going through this. Now, through the use of Christian symbolism and notions of respectability, Garvey was able to promote this new organization. It was important within the colonial context and for the success of Garvey's venture, that he act accordingly to the appropriate social and religious norms. This was especially true in his adherence to a Christian ethos. Moreover, the use of Christian concepts and language in the UNIA facilitated the growth of Garveyism among the people of Moorish descent. Garvey also developed relationships with politically influenced people who were essentially to his success. Among many of Garvey's early supporters were a host of religious leaders and politicians. In his autobiography, Garvey attested to the powerful connections he um made. Nothing that he succeeded to a great extent in establishing the association in Jamaica with the assistance of a Catholic bishop, the governor, Sir John Pringle, the Reverend William Graham, a Scottish clergyman, and several other European friends. His time in Europe at the advent of World War I, and especially his exposure to the Brotherhood movement, taught Garvey that to be successful, he would need to promote collaboration and fraternity among men and women. This flexibility and open mindedness on the part of Garvey is especially apparent in the theological perspective, right? Because that's what we deal with, theological and theocratic government, right? So the reliance of Christian symbolism, traditions, and biblical narrative gave Garvey the aura of a religious prophet. At the same time, Garvey refused to allow the religious diversity among his followers stand in the way of his vision of a united Africa. Indeed, some scholars have argued that Garvey could be considered as a theologian, and through the UNIA, he created a civil religion, right? After all, Garvey desired to draw into one united, right? One united whole for his people. The 400 million Moors of the world rely heavily on his understanding of his people's spirituality because they didn't know who they were. So Garvey is the forerunner, and then the prophet is prophet, and he brought in the Moorish science, he brought in the nationality, and he brought in the real truth about who Negroes were. Okay, Negroes and Indians were who they were. They were Moors. African Americans, who they were Moors. They are Moors. Okay, so Garveyism, universal religion for the of African diaspora. Garveyism became the religious ethos promoted through the UNIA. A speech by Reverend J. David Brooks in the summer of 1920 captured this understanding before an excited group that sat eagerly in anticipation of the great convention planned for the following Sunday in New York City. Reverend Brooks interpreted the meaning of Garveyism. He told the crowd Garveyism is the spirit of self-reliance, depending on upon the power that God has given you, not the power of somebody else. Garveyism further is from the freedom of Africa. A direct connection was made between self reliance and the redemption of Africa. Moreover, this emphasis on the authority of the divine in Garveyism was a powerful force facilitating the conversion of millions to Garveyism and Garvey's cause. Garvey's reliance on religious zeal in advancing his movement resulted in frequent reference to him by both friends and enemies as the Moorish Moses, which we say aka Black Moses. Because we don't deal with black over here. Moors do not deal with black because that's not us. Black is this fez that I'm wearing my national headdress. This is my copper colored skin. It's not that. Okay. So we need to stop that. Okay. Now, refer to him both friends and enemies, right? The Old Testament story of Moses' great victory for God's chosen people over oppression and enslavement in Egypt and their settlement in Canaan, right, became a powerful story for creating a sense of nationhood among Moorish Americans beginning in the 19th century. The renewed emphasis on this biblical event, with Garvey serving as the prophetic leader, the uh, Moorish Moses, expressed the hopes and aims of Moorish Americans in the early 20th century. The emphasis on the redemption of Africa placed Garvey as the leader sent by God to end European colonialism and to establish a new nation for people of Moorish descent scattered across the globe. On a Sunday evening in August 1920, UNIA member from California, Reverend Dr. John Dawson Gordon, offered a new interpretation of Jesus Christ at a meeting of Garveyites at Liberty Hall in New York City. Reverend Gordon defended their um, deliverer from oppression. Marcus Garvey, the Moorish Moses, don't go back on Jesus Christ, but the present kind of Christianity should be rejected, he argued, because they're using a pale face, and that was in Yahshua. So why are you worshiping a deity that don't look like you? Oh, it doesn't matter what he looked like? Okay, that's why you still in the same state that you are. Islam. Now, don't go back on Jesus Christ, but the present kind of Christianity should be rejected, he argued. So I want all of us to be imbued with such sentiments as we have had to tonight from this Moses of our race, who is going to inspire us with true manhood through his entire extortion and help this race to go on to success. Reverend Gordon called for a new understanding of Jesus, one that still honored the Savior, but was divorced from the modern European white racist religious beliefs and practices in the United States, as well will be discussed in this essay. In the mid 1920s, Noble Drew Ali preached that Garvey was more than the Black Moses. He was John the Baptist. Okay, he was the Moorish Moses. He was John the Baptist, whose divine mission was not to lead his people out of captivity and into the promised land, right? But rather to prepare them to become followers of the new Messiah, Prophet Noble Drew Ali. The religious symbolic statement by Ali may have been more important than previously recognized. As Garveyism began to spread, it transformed the way that some colonized people understood their position in the world. East Indian Gamis Ryle, in a February 1922 letter to the editor of the Negro World, observed that Garveyism is a passion, a new religion that has filled the soul and spreading faster and winning new converts. The tenet, though simple, is fervently voiced and re echoed: one God, one aim, one destiny, the high level of spiritual favor associated with Garveyism. Attach many religious leaders, such as Revs, Brooks, and Gordon, because of the combination of the sacred and circular appeal of the UNIA, which was shaped by Garvey's personal experience and travels in Central America, the Caribbean, and in Europe. If anything, Garvey acted as a master craftsman, tailoring his vision of the redemption of Africa to the cultural traditions and customs of communities throughout the African diaspora. The historian Randall Burkett pointed out the symbols, rituals, and beliefs which constituted the incoherent so-called black civil religion were of course not new to Garvey's audience. Indeed, had they been new, they would not have found a responsive hearing. They rather grew out of and built upon a shared experience that was interpreted in the light of a transcending goal, the uplift of the so-called Negro race and the redemption of Africa, because the upliftment of the Moors and the redemption of Africa. Okay, Bucket's research revealed that up to 250 clergymen were active at some point in the UNIA. These include clergymen from in two of the most powerful Moor denominations, the National Baptist Convention and the African Methodist Episcopal AME Church. But there were others from the AME Zion Christian Methodist, Episcopal, Protestant Episcopal, Moorish Jews, Congregational, and Presbyterian churches, and some holiness and Pentecostal congregation. The religious diversity among Garveyites demonstrated that the UNIA was an organization that welcomed all more people of all religious black backgrounds, right? For many Garveyites, especially those in the South, the religious overtones of Garveyism and the focus of the redemption of Moors were extremely important, even though most never intended to emerge or intended to immigrate to Africa. Rather, they saw the redemption of Africa as something they were responsible for throughout the use of their God given talents, because they already knew, like, we're not going over on that side of Africa. We already in Africa, and all we're gonna do is redeem it, because all these modern Europeans, these modern nations went over there to control it and seize it and take it away from our hand. Okay, that's all that happened. So for most Garveyites, this means advancing themselves to the best economic positions possible and remaining a respectable member of the UNIA. Right? Interpretations of Garveyism remained flexible and adaptable for the people who took them up and breathed life into them. This was especially true of the emerging of Islamic groups associated with Garveyism. Mohammedanism, the true faith for Garveyites. The concern over the spiritual well being of Garveyites was discussed at the UNIA's 1922 convention. An entire session was dedicated to the future religious faith and belief of the Moor. According to the accounts, the discussion was lively and spirited, and at one point, several suggested that the Mohammedan's religion was the religion of three-fourths of the people of the so-called Negro race of the world, because we know they're not Negroes, they're Moors, and therefore should be considered an important religious alternative to Christianity, declaring that there were more righteous people found among Mohammedans than among professed Christians. This, the suggestion that Islam was the true faith of the majority of Moors people around the world helps to explain the expansion of Islamic organization, um, tang- tangentially related to the UNIA. This meant that for the sake of unity, it was very unwise to legislate in the matter of religion. The delegates were instructed to use as they wished the information they obtained at this session, because that's why the prophet said that you will be able to worship under your own vine and fig tree. The prophet said some of my best Moors are in the church. Okay? So, and that reference, that means that we need to get, okay, these Moors out of these pseudo religious um indoctrinaments. You feel what I'm saying? That's controlling their mind state. They need to free themselves. You know what I mean? But I can't do it for them. They got to do it for themselves. Islam. Now, the delegates were instructed to use as they wish the information they obtained at this session. At this time, Garveyites may have had exposure to Islam from the works by Pan Africanists such as Edward Wilmot Bladen and Deuce Muhammad Ali, who were sympathetically to Islam and influential on Garvey. In 1887, Bladen published Christianity, Islam, and the Moor race, which we know is the so called Negro race, a compilation of speeches, articles, and reviews. The first chapter, Mohammedanism, and the so called Negro race, because he wanted to introduce those Moors who have Negro minds to come up out of the Negro mindedness, because you are Moors in your religion and your sciences, and everything is in Masonry and is in Mohammedanism. Okay? And that's what the modern European has adopted from you and kept in secret, now converting you up under their rule. You see what I'm saying? When you are the father of it, they are the sons. You was the first one with it, and you gave it to them to help them out. Okay? And they turned around what you gave them and used it against thee. Now, Mohammedism, right, declared that Islam among Moors was quite dignified and respectable. Biden was also an advocate for Pan Africanism, right? Arguing that Africans on both sides of the Atlantic needed to unify. These ideas were later echoed in the ideologies of Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. Deuce Muhammad Ali was influential in disseminating ideas about Pan Africanism in Islam, though the African Times and Orient Review, ATOR, ATOR, African Americans learn about events in Africa. So this is Moorish Americans learning events in Africa. Okay, because it's the Orient, which is Oriental, which goes into Asiatics. See what I'm saying? Now, Moorish Americans learn about events in Africa, Europe, and Asia. The journal began circulation in 1912 and by 1917 had established offices in New York and Chicago through the Chicago Gazette and the Champion magazine, respectively. ATOR also had agents in Yonkers, New York, Wilmington, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Los Angeles, California. This allowed to the dissemination of Islamic and Pan African ideas in Moorish American communities across the United States of America. Deuce Muhammad Ali remained an important figure whose ideas about Islam and Africa remain influential well into the 20th century. As early as 1912, Deuce Muhammad Ali advocated the unification of Africa and Asia, a theme that would get picked up by Noble Drew Ali. Deuce Muhammad Ali warned, Europe stretches out her hands on every side to squeeze the darker races to her advantage, because she knows the people of Africa and the people of Asia to be divided, and they are one as the same. Her aim has been to promote division. It therefore behooves you, men of Asia, men of Africa, to join yourselves in one common bond of lasting friendship. After ATOR ceased publication in 1918, Deuce Muhammad Ali used his connections to African American journalism, which is Moorish American journalism, John Edward Bruce and Marcus Garvey, to work as the international affairs guest editor of the so-called Negro world. While we know little about Deuce Muhammad Ali's other activities during this time in the United States of America, we do know that by 1926 he had set up the Universal Islamic Society in Detroit, Michigan, followed by the America Asia Society in 1927. Okay, possibly inspired by Deuce Muhammad Ali, Noble Drew Ali program for MSTA included a revising of the historical identity of Moorish Americans. According to Drew Ali, Moorish Americans were not simply descendants of Africa, but were also members of one large Asiatic family that had historical roots during and dating back to the creation of mankind. Okay, in the Quran questions, well, in the creation of man, because mankind wasn't around. So dating back to the creation of man. In the Quran questions for Moorish Americans, a study guide of Moorish science doctrine, Drew Ali asserted that Adam and Eve were the mothers and fathers of the human family. Asiatic and Muslims. The couple went into Asia, and the modern name given to their children was indeed Asiatics. In addition to the link between Asiatic identities that were traced back to the dawn of man, Drew Ali asserted that those who guarded the holy city of Mecca today were angels named Asiatics. Drew Ali's creation of a new racial designation for his followers as Moorish Americans meant that his believers were not Negroes, but were part of a holy family connected to Adam and Eve, as well as modern Islam. Moorish Americans were thus members of a worldwide Asiatic group, and instead of insisting, right, that the people of Asia and Africa unite, Drew Ali argued that they were one and the same, which I just said earlier. Our prophet was intelligent, he was a genius. He already knew, he was divinely prepared by the great God of Allah, right? So, in his plea to the nations, Drew Ali insisted that all loyal, faithful Moors, members, and the American citizens to help in uplifting fallen humanity among the Asiatic race and nation. It is clear that Drew Ali, in an attempt to better the conditions of Moorish Americans in the United States of America, used a combination of ideas about race, nation, and religion to construct a viable identity to offset the disparaging images prevalent in American society, which the modern Europeans took and duped and reiterated through trickology and using different images of themselves, but playing the role of a Moor. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, Menelik, they'll have a European face, but you see what I'm saying, but have all my attributes. You see what I'm saying? Which is which is fraudulent to keep Moors in a mental state. Okay, that's just like with Yahshua. They got this Caesar Boga playing as Yahshua. They calling him Jesus, but that's not the Messiah. He's not the prophet. Okay, period. So, but that's the confusion that and the indoctrination that Moorish Americans have to go and be induced to while we here up under the apparatus of these modern Europeans. Okay? Now, okay, the United States use a combination, right? Ideas about race, nation, and religion to construct a viable identity to offset the disparaging image prevalent in American society. Yes, that's what the prophet did. Now, Marcus Garvey also created the UNIA as a response to what he saw as global racial discrimination against people of Moorish descent. Within the organization, the members created their own unique responses to modern European so called white racism and thus included um, synchronizing a number of religious and cultural identities. Arnold J. Ford, a prominent Garveyite, uh, exhibi- exhibited some of this creative fusion in his religious and musical productions. As the musical director of the UNIA and later as a leader of the Moorish Israelite movement in Harlem, Ford was responsible for synthesizing various religious traditions in an attempt to fortify racial harmony. One way he did this was by using Islamic language in his music productions. According to Richard Brett Turner, Arnold Josiah Ford utilized the symbols of Islam in several of his musical compositions for the organization. Allahu Akbar was the title of one of his hymns. In other hymns, Ford made references to the divine as Allah. For example, in one line, he connected Allah to the mission of the UNIA, stating in that most sacred name, Allah, one could, one aim, one destiny. He is Father of all creation. Allah is ultimate, supreme in every way and in nation. God bless our president. The simultaneously reference to Allah and God and the titles and lyrics of the hymns demonstrated the Islamic representation in Garveyism. This is significant, especially when we consider the possible effects this religion language had on Garveyites singing Ford lyrics. The presentation of God through the Arabic language is one of the important threads that connected Garveyism to the development of Moorish American Islamic organization. Ford's biblical stories contain Islamic references to the divine, creating a new message for Garveyites. For example, one of the lines in a hymn referred to the Old Testament, Testament story of Cain and Abel. From runs Cain, whose vengeful mood, a doctrine cured, preferred to spill or drink his brother's blood, when love is in Allah's word. Religious synchronism and forced hymns for the UNIA signals that the membership was respective to these ideas. UNIA members chose various hymns to open and close their meanings. Therefore, it is not difficult to understand why future leaders such as Noble Drew Ali would replicate these hybrid representations of the divine and why some of their followers will be respective to it. In the post World War I era, the UNIA was expanding and becoming a global movement. By 27 June 1919, Garvey had officially incorporated the Black Star Line BSL as a commercial shipping venture to develop trade between Moorish Americans and Africans. However, this great feat would eventually lead to Garvey's downfall and greatly weaken the UNIA in the United States. From 1919 to 1922, Garvey focused significantly on the UNIA resources on the development of the shipping operation. But this unfortunately put Garvey in an increasingly vulnerable position. On 12 January 1922, Garvey was indicted on trumped up charges of mail fraud related to solicitations on behalf of the BSL. Okay, on behalf of the BSL. So, the political, financial, and legal trade Garvey encountered from federal officials had determined effect on his ability to lead the UNIA in the United States of America. With the great success of Garvey among Moorish Americans and the expansion of the UNIA globally, Garvey soon came under attack not just from the U.S. Corporation government, but also from other Moorish American leaders in the United States, such as these so-called Moors with Negro mindsets attacked them, okay, in an attempt to undermine Marcus Garvey and his all Moorish campaigns for more advancement, right? Several inter, inter, integrationist leaders unified in a Marcus Garvey must go campaign According to historian Tony Martin, the campaign was a temporary alliance of convenience between so-called black socialists, represented particularly by a Philip Randolph and Chandler Owens, some so-called Black Urban League officials, the NAACP, and miscellaneous so-called Black integrationalists. See, they want to integrate. You know what I mean? They want to bring the Europeans and integrate. That's been going on since the 1920s, and they succeeded it through Martin Luther King when they integrated everybody, because they're taking two nations that were separate and making it all one and try to say, oh, this is just one nation here, and then they subjugating us, that we're supposed to have our own laws and our own bylaws, our own jurisdiction. We're supposed to have our own. Okay, they depleted that, and then they brought that into play. That's why we got all this bull crap corruption going on now. Okay, now many of the leaders of the campaign had previously disagreed with Garvey on a number of issues. For example, the editor of the Chicago Defender, Robert S. Abbott, as early as 1919, published a series of articles criticizing Garvey and his activities. The series of articles led to a libel suit filed by Garvey against Abbott. But the Moorish American leaders' campaign against Garvey helped to weaken Garvey' reputation in the United States, because those were all NAACP, WD, the Bose, and all them Boule mulattoes, okay, that like I said before, didn't have power here. And they got power right along with the modern Europeans, so they got together on against Moors here. And that's the truth. Okay? That's the truth. They got together against Moors, and they kept putting the Negro, the black, the colored on us. Okay? Now, because they didn't have no laws. They were slaves. Even the colored people that were free, they didn't have as many right as the Moor here. Okay, that's why we had a black and white system, because Moors were known as the whites. Period. And the blacks were the modern Europeans and all the foreigners that came over here, unless they had a nationality. Then we allotted your rights to your nationality, and that's how Moors did things here. All right, because this was the Holy Land. Now, 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 Garvey was found guilty of mail fraud, was imprisoned, and eventually deported in November 1927. Once in prison and then deported, the political vacuum created space for a number of other leaders, such as Noble Drew Ali, to step in. Okay, because Noble Drew Ali, he already knew where the movement was going, and and Marcus Garvey was already working with Deuce Muhammad Ali. So this was divine, and it was divine right up to his movement, right up to his moment. So everything was in divine session. Now, it is important to note that by the mid 1920s, while Garvey's influence in the United States of America was diminished, his ideology, well, I ain't gonna say ideology, his ideas and movement continue to live on through UNIA, because being a Negro is an ideology, and we're not Negroes. See what I'm saying? So yeah, there is little doubt that Noble Drew Ali was attuned to the teachings of Garvey and very likely read the Negro World, right? The UNIA's weekly newspaper, the paper first published in 1918, rose to prominence and eventually gained a weekly readership of 200,000 between 1920 and 1927. The editorial staff and contributions were some of the most renowned writers and intellectuals of the era, including historian William H. Ferris, Harlem intellectual Herbert H. Harrison, journalist Thomas T. Fortune, and many others, as was common in that period. The so-called Negro world, which was the Moorish world, right? Routinely reprinted articles of interest to the Moorish American community, first published in other newspapers such as the New York Herald and the New York Times. This talented staff and material printed from diverse news sources inform readers about a wide range of topics. Garveyite Austin Evans Bridgman dedicated a poem to Marcus Garvey, and it was published in the so called Negro World on 13th January 1923. The poem not only addressed the significance of Garvey's recent legal troubles, it also emphasized the presence of Islam among his followers. The poem offered a goodwill message to Garvey through a prayer to Allah. I pray that prayer that the Easterners do, may the peace of Allah abide with you. Wherever you stay, wherever you go, may the beautiful palms of Allah grow. Through days of labor and nights of rest, the love of Allah make you blessed. So I touch my heart as the Easterners do. May the peace of Allah abide with you. May the giver of gifts give unto you that which is good and that which is true, the will to help and the courage to do, a heart that can sing the whole day, though whether the sky be clear or blue. May the giver of gifts give these to you. And then we have Bridgman's poems, words of condolences to Marcus Garvey, is just another indication of how Islam resonate with Garveyites. Islamic references in Garveyism are significant in helping to explain the eventual success of Noble Drew Ali's Moorish science among former UNIA members. In the second half of the 1920s, although Garvey never openly supported Islam in the UNIA, he was aware of its presence among his many followers. The connection between Islam and Garveyism was clear in a number of Moorish American Islamic organizations created by the former UNIA leaders between 1926 and 1939, when 9 of the 11 early communities were formed. The UNIA proved to be fertile ground for the conversion of many Garveyites to Islam indeed. Richard Brent Turner's work on Moorish American Islam points to a number of explanations for what he called the appropriation of Islamic reference by Garveyism. Noble Drew Ali, Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, and Elijah Muhammad were all politically connected to Garveyism in different ways and mentioned Garvey frequently in their speeches and writings. At at the same time, Garvey appropriated ideas from Moorish Muslims leaders in Europe and the United States, such as Deuce Muhammad Ali. These connections were part of a global pan Islamic movement that brought together pan Africanists from Asia, Africa, and the United States of America, Europe, and the West Indies as they creatively reformulated Moorish cultural and political identities around the issues of self determination. Moreover, the influence and spread of Garveyism ensured that the distinctive version of Islam developed by Muslims in the United States was inherently imbued with ideas of race pride and self determination. This unique formation of Islam in the Moorish American context has been criticized by some as not being authentically Islamic. Of course, this type of essentialist reading of Islamic faith does not allow space to understand religion through the followers' interpretation and practice of their faith. However, Turner's scholarship in particular shows us that there were complicated Pan African networks developing over the course of the 19th and early 20th century, giving rise to a number of Islamic organizations espousing the Garveyite mission of the redemption of Africa. By 1923, many of the Garvey's followers were very likely already familiar with Islam. For example, members of the UNIA's Chicago branches could have encountered the Indian Muslim missionary Mufti Muhammad Sadiq in the early 1920s as he established close contact with the UNIA and utilized Garveyism to facilitate the spread of Islam among Moorish Americans in the city. In 1920, Sadiq set up a mosque on 4448 South Wabash Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. By 1923, Sadiq was participating member in the UNIA while simultaneously working to gain converts to the Islamic Ahmadiyya movement. He published the Ahmadiyya movement newspaper, The Muslim Sunrise, out of his Chicago home and distributed it in the local Moorish American community. Indeed, by 1935, the Ahmadis had successfully converted over 1,000 Americans, many in Chicago and Detroit, two cities that also became centers of Moorish science activity. It was more than a coincidence that Noble Drew Ali later set up his temple on Chicago's south side, just a few blocks away. The bleeding of Islam and science, the blending of Islam and science. In addition to the presence of Islamic symbolism in the UNIA, the value of understanding religion scientifically was another important theme in Garveyism. During the afternoon session on 25th of August 1922, the 25th day of the UNIA's convention, Arnold J. Ford insisted that the previous discussion of the future religious faith and belief of the Moors be reconvened so that some definite action may be taken in regard to it. The President General Marcus Garvey, who was not present during the morning session, explained that the UNIA would not dictate any one religious faith or religious belief. Rather, the idea was to bring to the Moor a scientific understanding of religion. He explained that what was desired was one great Christian con fractionality without regard to any particular denomination, believing ourselves to be religious Christians. Garvey then suggested that the creation of a committee that would consult religious leaders from the different denominations and hold a great religious conference with the aim of bringing them all together in one great religious institution. Garvey believed that the committee should study the matter from a scientific viewpoint and return to the next convention with a plan that could successfully address the issues. In this meeting, Garvey's main concern seemed to be finding a scientific way to deal with great religious diversity in the UNIA's membership. Garvey's insistence of viewing religion through a scientific lens may help to explain the development of Moorish science and its success among former Garveyites. Noble Drew Ali, through his formation of the Moorish Science Temple of America, MSTA, will take advantage of the religious fidelity available to Garveyites and other scientific understanding of religion that taught to love instead of hate. Before Drew Ali became the leader and prophet of the successful Chicago-based Moorish science, he went by the name and title of Professor Drew, the Egyptian Adab student. As a professor, he based his activities out of his Newark, New Jersey home on 181st Warren Street and professed to have a divine power that allowed him to heal the sick. Drew Ali's move toward Islam and the specific concept of Moorish science may have been influenced more by what he read and was exposed to in Garveyism than has been previously suggested by scholars. The pages um, of the more world in 1926, which we know as the Negro world, right? But we don't use Negro. More world in 1926 and 27 had a number of advertisements for Mohammedan scientists. The number and frequency of ads, along with the diversity of their images, suggesting that they were several men calling themselves Mohammedan scientists. Perhaps this was one of the sources of inspiration for Noble Drew Ali, which they always want to say that. But who was calling themselves Mohammedans and all this? Nobody but um, Deuce Muhammad, okay, who was a Moor, he was a Moor. So, and Noble Drew Ali was a Moor. So, why Noble Drew Ali didn't have this information if he was a Egyptian Adap? Wouldn't he already know this? See, these people be they already be trying to slander our prophet, but they're not gonna get away with slander. Not with me, Morris. Yeah, but so they're trying to say that the prophet wasn't already divinely prepared. He was already divinely prepared, and the actions that he was doing brought everybody else into the fold because nobody didn't know about. Even they said it in this in here that Garvey didn't know anything about the Moorish science of religion. The prophet did though. Yeah. So we're gonna get that straight. Okay. Now, now we already know as Moors that Islam been the sacred political agreement and arrangement with the with ancient Kemet and Egypt. We already know that. Okay. So when they try to mix and scratch and try to act like our prophet didn't know nothing, they liars. Okay. They want to try to make our prophet like he didn't know what he was doing and what he came to do. He knew all this. That's why he put everything together and he was around the right people to get it done. Now, for Noble Drew Ali and his creation of more science, since he too blended Islam and science to provide a solution to life's problems, these advertisements featured men who claimed they possessed special powers derived from secret knowledge obtained from the East, able to help heal people, right? And these people were coming up after the Prophet and the Garveyites movement, okay? Because they said this is one example of the many images of Mohammedan scientists featured in the Negro World 3 July 1926 because the prophet already had these people up under him engaging in these things and they was going to take you know roles in more science. Okay. So yeah, this is around the time the prophet was around. This is the 3rd of July 1926. This is the same time that the prophet was teaching people. So if the prophet is teaching people that they Mohammedans and they are more scientists, wouldn't you think Moors will be coming up and saying they more scientists too? Stop the bull crap, man. Y'all need to stop it. Now, it says one of these advertisements for a Mohammedan scientist appeared in the so-called Negro World on July 24th, 1926, for months before Noble Drew Ali incorporated Moorish science in Chicago. Right, the advertisement claimed that the scientist was an expert in occultism of Moorish American and Egyptian philosophy, mystic and psychic sciences, and was a crystal scientific master ADAP business counselor. According to the ad, the he had the ability to help people in trouble, especially when it matters in their everyday lives. The ad went on to state the ancient occult mystery of Africa and India are being examined and accepted because this is the prophet. They mixing and scratching, Morris. This is the prophet. Ain't nobody. This is the prophet talking. Okay, ain't nobody talking about the figure and all this, that, and the third. That's the prophet. This is the prophet because he's the ADAP. He's the ADAP. Okay, he's the Egyptian ADAP that's studying more science. He's the one who knows this stuff. So how these people that the prophets running around teaching, and then all of a sudden they got some guy that's talking about he a Muhammad scientist. No, that's the prophet. Okay, this is what they do with history. They mix and scratch. Okay, and they try to throw you off. Now, it went on to state that the ancient occult mysteries of Africa and India are being examined and accepted. The magic of Egypt, Chaldea, India, and other places well known to disciples, are today being assimilated by the Western man. We invite all those who are interested in things occult to see us. To the uninitiated, all things are impossible, but to the initiated, is all so. He that can understand, let him understand. Allah be praised. Right? The rhetoric in these advertisements was similar to many of Noble Drew Ali's writings, own writings before his creation of MSTA. Proof Drew, Egyptian ADAP student in Newark, claimed to possess spiritual abilities and could give divine instructions and interpret the Bible from Genesis to Revelations. He also claimed to have 18 years of Christ's life that is silent to your holy Bible for all those who desire to know more about Jesus the Christ. This early reference to his um prolific construction showed that Drew Ali was concerned with crafting a unique perspective that would appeal to Moorish Americans. While there has been some suggestion that Noble Drew Ali received his interest, right, in the occult and mythicism from the branches of Masonry, such as the ancient Egyptian Arabic order, nobles of the mystic shrine, right, which Suleiman, right, was a part of, and the prophet was a part of, right, because the prophet was teaching these people, and the prophet was teaching them, but they was all getting upset and mad with the prophet because he knew a lot of stuff. So a lot of people came around him to learn, period, because they didn't know this stuff. Now, now the Shriners, it is possible that these Mohammedan scientists influenced Ali's thinking. No, 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 no. They didn't influence nothing. Ali influenced them because then nobody was talking about this until Ali came on the scene. So we're gonna stop that and we're gonna debunk the bullcrap. Okay. Now, Islamic scholar Peter Lamborn Wilson, for example, argued the first deep source of more science is Masonry. Yet, when we take into consideration the advertisement by Mohammedan scientists and the so-called Negro world, these other figures and their organizations should be taken into account. By 1928, Noble Drew Ali had established himself as the supreme Mohammedan scientist, as leader and prophet of the Moorish Science Temple, right? Because he was the only one doing it, because he was the supreme, because everybody else was copying. He was teaching everybody else. So stop it. Now, which tout with told it a membership of 30,000 in 12 cities. And that same year, Ali also published the sacred text of the movement, the Circle 7 Quran, and successfully stated, right, started the newspaper for the movement, the Moorish Guide. Indeed, Noble Drew Ali was aware of the value of titles and understood the power that scientific validity could add to one's cause. This was quite apparent, especially given the work of social scientists such as Herbert Spencer, who applied Charles Darwin's work on evolution and theory of survival of the fittest to human societies. See, who you think the Darwinism and all that was learned by? Those modern Europeans didn't know nothing. The Moors taught them all that. Then they stole what the Moors taught them, and then they turned around and indoctrinated the Moors into being Negroes, coloreds, African Americans, and all these damn brands. Okay? Now, when you look, the impact of these eschatological claims was often a matter of life or death for Moorish Americans, since science had been used to reinforce racial hierarchies and justify, lynching campaigns and Jim Crow legislation. Noble Drew Ali understood this well, and in 1926 made use of science disclose the cursive power in modern American culture by including it in the title of his religious organization, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. Drew Ali sought to teach more men and women their nationality and divine creed. He argued that they are not Negroes, colored folk, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779. Drew Ali saw himself as the next prophet in a long history and argued that the name means everything by renaming of his members Moorish Americans and the adding Bay or L to their given names, Day, El, Bay, Day, Al, Ali, or Allah. Okay? Titles. Okay? Sought to distinct Ali sought to distance them from racial injustice and make them anew. With the power of science and religion backing his movement, there was a possibility and guarantee of success with the authority of Garvey, the validity of science, and a genealogy built for Moorish ancestry. Drew Ali had found what he needed to develop a following because he needed these Moors to follow him so they can learn their nationality and their birthrights and their creed. He making leaders. Okay? Now, from Garveyism to Moorish science in Chicago, Noble Drew Ali did not begin his organization activities in Chicago, but in Newark, New Jersey, as Professor Drew as early as 1913. Ali had problems attracting and sustaining membership in the early movement. It was not until after December 1925 that Ali's evangelization began to bear fruit. This was directly related to Garvey's decline. Historian Robert Dawn in the so-called Black Pilgrimage to Islam described the transition in Drew Ali's teaching as he moved west from Newark. In Chicago, Noble Drew Ali became a more overt race man, styling his political appeal on a program similar to Marcus Garvey's back to Africa ideology, but Noble Drew Ali's general approach to religion closely paralleled Garvey's in his desire to embrace the ritual of Moorish culture as a vehicle for Moorish American political unity. The Circle 7 Quran, the sacred text of Moorish science, directly connects the life and legacy of Marcus Garvey to the divine preparation for Noble Drew Ali's success as leader of Moorish science. This is revealed in an excerpt from the Circle 7 Quran. In this chapter titled The End of Time and the Fulfilling of the Prophecies, Noble Drew Ali explains the genealogy of his ordination by Allah. The last prophet in these days is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared divinely in due time by Allah and to redeem men from their sinful ways and to warn them of the great wrath which is sure to come upon the earth. John the Baptist was the forerunner of Jesus in those days to warn and stir up the nation and prepare them to receive the divine creed which was to be taught by Yahshua. In these modern days, there came a forerunner who was divinely prepared by the great God Allah, and his name is Marcus Garvey, who did teach and warn the nations of the earth to prepare to meet the coming prophet, who was to bring the true and divine creed of Islam, and his name is Noble Drew Ali, who was prepared and sent to this earth by Allah to teach the old time religion and the everlasting gospel to the sons of men, that every nation shall and must worship under their own vine and fig tree, and return to their own and be one with their Father God Allah. This passage indicated that Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey had a direct connection to one another that had a precedent in biblical truth. It is also stated that Noble Drew Ali was a prophet like Yahshua. This reference of Garvey's as John the Baptist supports the idea that it was not until the mid 1920s that Garvey's incarceration, right, that Moorish science began to expand. Noble Drew Ali often highlighted the connection to Garvey in recruiting campaigns for MSTA members, and Ali publicized this relationship in the movement's paper, the Moorish Guide. For example, on November 19, 1927, the newspaper reported Noble Drew Ali returns after a long visit south. This article detailed Ali's visit to Garvey in Atlanta federal prison, and Ali followed up this report with a drive for new members. According to the article, Mr. Garvey was very much pleased with the splendid uplift work being done by the Moorish Divine Movement. The rest of the article described the membership drive launched by the movement, emphasizing that persons desirous of learning the great work that is being done are asked to write Prophet Ali. This article showed Noble Drew Ali's reliance on Garvey's popularity within the Moorish American community to solidify Ali's position as a race leader. While Ali gained esteem by emphasizing his connections to Garvey, there is no evidence that Garvey actually knew or agreed with Ali's mission. Yes, it was, because it was um it was a point in fact in time that the prophet came and visit Marcus Mozart Garvey in Atlanta, but they always trying to put certain stuff in correspondence, right? Like, on this stuff is not true, but it's true. Okay. Now, between Garvey and Leonard Smith, the president of the Detroit UNIA division revealed as of September 1927 that Garvey was unaware of Ali and his mission. Smith informed, which he's a liar, him that Ali was using Garvey's reputation and fame to win over followers to Ali's movement. Garvey replied, "I know nothing of this man." Referred to, it is silly for people to allow every unknown person to agitate and influence them on such serious matters. I have spoken and written enough for the people of Detroit to understand the purpose of organization and not allow strangers to decoy and exploit them by calling or using my name. Here, Garvey seemed dismissive of Ali and recognized his own organizing techniques as superior beyond question. This quote suggests that Ali was using Garvey's reputation in Detroit to gain followers. At the same time, Noble Drew Ali's Moorish science resembled Garvey's UNIA in a number of ways. Identity politics, racial uplift, and spiritual fulfillment were emphasized in both Marcus Garvey UNIA and Noble Drew Ali's Moorish science. To be sure, the cultural practices and characteristics of both social movements appealed to the masses of Moorish Americans after the failure of Reconstruction in the former Confederacy, followed by the imposition of Jim Crow laws and the terrorizing reality of lynching of Moorish Americans, developed all black alternatives, right? Which is so-called black alternatives to their exclusion from many aspects of the United States of America social life. Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali offer valuable alternatives to be harsh relatives Moorish Americans confronted by claiming and Moorish identity. So this is what the scholars will write. They'll say that the prophet and Marcus Garvey didn't know each other and that Garvey wrote this, but that's a lie because it's already written that Garvey already spoke to the prophet before he was deported. So if Garvey didn't want um the prophet to pick up where he left, why he let the prophet put stuff in his literature and why he didn't protest, you see what I'm saying, furiously, because those are lies. See what I'm saying? And plus, if Marcus Mozart Garvey, right, was working with Deuce Muhammad Ali, who was a Moor, what makes you think that he wasn't working with this Moor? Huh? See, it just is abstinent, right? It's moronic. You see what I'm saying? How these people try to rewrite us out of history. See what I'm saying? Now we got Noble Drew Ali and Marcus Garvey gave their followers a sense of self that asserted Moorish greatness and challenged so-called modern Europeans' white claims, right, of black inferiority because they are the real black people. They swap places. Okay? So if anybody is inferior, it's them. Now, in Moorish movement built upon Garveyism and offered its members a chance, right, for a better future, historian Emery Talbert noted that in discussion of Moorish reparation, right, specific details were not important. Rather, the more significant question was, what are you going to leave your children? Garvey's critics, without ever talking to the men and women whose contributions were financing the UNIA, assumed that physically boarding a ship and selling to Africa was total goal of rank and file. Garveyized, hence they saw Garveyism as mass um, hip hypnotism, and Garvey's as little more than autumn nations following the lead of their Messiah, had they bothered to question the masses. They would have found an intelligent people who were perfectly aware of the obstacles to African repatriation, but who also realized with more immediate evidence that life in a modern European dominated country held little hope for them unless a Moor nation could embody the Moor man's power and command respect for him around the world. Now, Tolbert highlighted the pragmatic nature of the actions taken by the followers of Garvey, who were concerned with self-determinist objectives as well as the cultural and economic inheritance and livelihood left for their children. The resolve to identify with Africa and a so-called black nation that would triumph over the injustice experienced in the United States demonstrated one potential solution to the problems created by modern European so-called white supremacists. Although Noble Drew Ali offered a dramatically different solution, his movement made use of Garvey's program and insights into racial politics, especially by defining the divine and incorporating that definition into a new religious movement. Noble Drew Ali, too, worked hard to ensure that the Moorish Science Temple will provide an appropriate vehicle for the maintenance of good morals and strong family structures and the supreme laws, the rules guiding the leaders of Moorish science. Ali declared that no leader should be staying away from home or neglecting his duty at home or must allow the public to know of their wrongdoings. Rather, they must forever live the life of love at home, and it must be known by all members. Ali also made sure to include chapters in the Circle 7 Quran that provided marriage instructions for man and wife from the noble prophet, including the duty of a husband and the holy instructions for thy children, demonstrating his concern for the security and success of generations of Moorish Americans to come. Noble Drew Ali's vision of Moorish science was uh, a work of greatness and progress, and the movement's limited success would not have been possible without the diligent work of the sound prophet. Okay, foundations laid by Garvey, okay, and the UIAs during the first convention of Moorish science held in October 1928. The Chicago Defender ran an article publicizing the event and reported on the changes that were planned for the structure of Moorish science. The article mentioned the Supreme Grand Council, which will have the power and duty to control and supervise all the affairs and properties of the Moorish Science Temple of America and will be the sole judge of what constitutes conduct injurious and to the other peace interests or welfare of the organization or of variance with its constitution and bylaws. Millie L., formerly Edward Millie, was appointed to the Supreme Grand Council as the Supreme Grand Sheik. In essence, the second in command of the MSCA, the Supreme Council, Noble Drew Ali declared consistent of men tried and true, accepted according to their words, works, and deeds. Though the appointment of Millie L., a former Garveyite, to the Supreme Council and second only to Noble Drew Ali, MSTA appropriated the program initially laid out by the UNIA and offered a new way to organize Moorish Americans utilizing Islam, science, and Moorish ancestry to challenge the racial inequities of American society. So, Millie L., who was a Garveyite, okay, that was appointed by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali, okay, was appointed by the Prophet Noble Drew Ali. So you don't think that the Prophet didn't know Marcus Mozart Garvey? See, these people are slanderous. All they do is make these so-called scholarly documents of PDFs, and all they do is get together and slander and try to confuse the concepts of more science and blend it with all this Negro talk, okay, and blend it with they ideologies, okay. Now we're gonna get into, you know what I mean, this other piece right here of Noble Drew Ali, so we can understand that the prophet came and his lessons and the degrees of the lessons that was put forth really liberated Moors here, because we had a Negro mindset. And once you go into Garveyism and Pan Africanism, see what I'm saying? That was to unite all melanated people around the world. Okay, so we can bring them all in one facet, then tell them the truth of who they are. Then from that of telling them the truth of who they are, now we can establish, you know, um um restaurants, businesses, whatever, states. See what I'm saying? Authority in our land and a way to be merchants. You see what I'm saying? And to have economic power. That was the whole point. Okay. Now, women in the formation and development of the Moorish Science Temple of America, despite the numerous historical narratives on men participating in religious movements, including the history of the Moorish Science Temple of America, historians recognize that a majority of religious congregations congregations have been sustained by um their largely woman counterpart. This has especially been the case in the history of Moorish American religious formations, including but not limited to mainstream Protestant denominations. Even less attention has been paid to the activities of Moorish American women in Islam, resulting in a large gap in the history and contributing to the belief that women were either not involved in forming and sustaining these religious groups, or that the participation was in some way not as significant as the men. But it was women, it was Moabites that were holding this more science down. They were harder than some of these men. Okay. They did not fold, they did not. Okay, that's why we as Moors got to bring more science to the Moabite. Okay, because when she's in her right mind, then we cannot be tricked. All right. Now, their participation was in some way uh not as significant as their men counterparts, which is a lie. However, the research for this chapter on women roles in the MSTA early years reveals that they were involved in MSTA publications, conventions, entertainment, business ventures, and leadership of the movement, thus shedding new light on Moorish American women and Islamism in the United States of America. Okay, now women scholars in the 1980s commenced some of the historical research necessary to document the role of women in Islam. In these studies, the focus has been mainly on Arab women as representatives, but they're not the representatives. The Moabite women are the representative of Islam because they are ancient. They are more ancient than these modern Europeans, these modern pale skinned nations. Okay, now American Muslim women have been less represented in the scholarship, and as a result, studies of Islam in the United States of America has varied between the focus on women who are ethnically Arab and women converts to Islam, right? But it's not necessarily that the Moorish American women in the United States of America, political, scientific, right, and scientists, right? Samri Rashid has recognized that Moorish Americans represent the single largest group of Muslims in the United States of America. Studies of Moorish American Muslim women have been limited primarily to discussion of converts to, in Sunni Muslims groups and women in the Nation of Islam. This chapter seeks to aid to this scholarship some knowledge on the role of women in the Moorish Science Temple of America, since they were heavily involved in sustaining the group in its early years. In 2014, Bayna S. Jeffries, right, published A Nation Can Rise No Higher Than Its Woman, Moorish American Muslim women in the movement for Moors self-determination, 1950, 1975, which focused on the contributions of women in the Nation of Islam. This is the first full length of scholarly study of women's participation in one of the largest movements for Moors self determination in the post war United States. Explains the significance of women within the movement. Jeffries argues that women in the Nation of Islam were irresponsible for sustaining temple life, though her analysis of the Muslim girls training, which is the Muslim girl training, it is evident that education for women was a key element for building the NOI. Jeffries compared the MGT to the better known fruit of Islam, which stole all their stuff from the Moorish Science Temple. The fruit of Islam, how they dress, the women's garbs, the turbans, um, all that. Even the uniform that the Nation of Islam are wearing, those uniform comes from the Moorish Science temples, right? Now, it's just that we're not Moors are not that's in those temples are not going into drilling and doing all those practices that we was doing before. See, they stopped that once the schism arrived, right? When everybody wanted to do their own thing and go with the facet of them being the Nation of Islam and the fruit of Islam. And then they stopped being Asiatics and then started to become black Asiatics. They stopped wearing their fezzes, okay? And that's the sellout. Because, like I said before, J. Edgar Hoover had a deal with Elijah Poole Bay. Okay. Now, such as parenting and spousal relationships in other areas like rules, laws, and security, self defense, spiritual instructions, and unity, i.e., working together as sisters and brothers in Islam. Another important aspect of women involvement in NOI was their contributions to the NOI newspaper. Muhammad Speaks and Final Call. Jeffries highlights the importance of opportunity for women to be meaningfully participated in their voice, their opinions. Jeffries studies is an important contribution to the scholarship of African American women in Islam generally and women in the Nation of Islam specifically. Other works on Moorish American Islam examine women participation in the movement. For example, Robert Demons, right, so-called Black Pilgrimage to Islam dedicates two chapters to women participating in conversion to various Sunni Islamic groups, which is all the fraud. See, all more supposed to be dealing with Sufism, right? The real concept of Islam, and we're supposed to be dealing with signs and symbols, the practice of masonry, okay? Because that's our science, all right? That's what more is supposed to be dealing with. That other Islam that they call themselves Muslims and all that, that's a religion of a dogmatic, I'm gonna say it again, of a dogmatic faith, okay? Moors do real Islam because we are the founders of it. Okay? Period. Now, by the desire to engage with Moorish Muslim men, this is a portrait of a woman who has a history, right, of doing certain things that she don't need to be doing, like being a drug addict and stuff like that. So what the temples did. We cleaned and make our Moors upright. Okay, we was there for them. All right, and the women was there because they ran the temples. They ran the Moorish auxiliaries. That's where all the stuff come from. It comes from the Moorish Science Temple. Okay. Now, the Temple of America, MSTA historian Amina Beverly McLeod in Moorish American Islam reported that for women in the Moorish Science Temple and the first mosque of Pittsburgh, right, subordinate of women's, subordinate of the women's temple. So, so accounts of the first women in their lives, women in Moorish science were instructed on their role in marriage, but unlike other Islamic groups, they were strictly monogamous, right, and did not practice polygamy. On the issue of dress, McLeod notes that women wear a modest dress and cover their heads, but do not seem to feel oppressed. Rather, their dress is viewed as a difference that aligns them with a worldview and identity other than slavery and God. So while women who joined the MSTA appear to adhere to the traditional roles of women in Islam, there is a difference in their attitudes about submission to men in the early years of the MSTA, especially women, maintained a high profile, and their contributions to the growth of the movement was significant, with women leading temples, acting as managing editors of the group's newspapers, and factoring prominently in the creation and maintenance of auxiliary groups. Other works of Moorish science also describes women involvement in the group. Historian Richard Brent Turner in Islam in the Moorish American Experience surveyed the activities of MSTA women in the 1940s, arguing that the continuation of the movement was dependent on the leadership of its women. He explained that in that era, women nurtured and supported their families. They cooked the meals required by the dietary laws of their religion, and they made much of the Moorish American clothing. They also joined various self help organizations that provided the basic necessities for their families, such as food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare. Turner also pointed out to the monthly magazine of the MSTA, the Moorish Voice, during the 1940s as another space for the involvement and leadership of women. He listed even women in 7 cities who were regular com- contributors in the magazine. He also highlighted the significance women in leadership positions within the movement, pointing to two women, Sister Mary Cliff Bay and Sister P. Reynolds L., the former the Grand Governess of Kentucky, and the latter the national chairperson of the Sisters Auxiliary. Michael A. Gomez, in his chapter of Moorish Science in the Moorish Crescent, the experience of Moorish Muslims in the Americas, looks at the leadership of women in the early movement, though the examination of a photograph from the first convention and the newspaper, the Moorish Guide, in the 1928 paragraph, there are two women seated in the front row, Sister C. Al's, Alsop Bay and Sister Lomax Bay. Gomez summarized that it was possible for women to ascend into the higher levels of organizational management. In looking at the Moorish God, Gomez observed that there was one Grand Sheikess, Sister Whitehead L., and that the managing editor of the newspaper was Juanita Richardson Bay. In his discussion of Juanita Richardson Bay, Gomez points out that she also served as the secretary treasurer of the Young People's Moorish League and was culturally very active. He cites a poem she wrote in the guide along with her rendition of a Rudyard Kipling poem at a meeting of the League as evidence of her leadership and cultural sophistication. On this point, he concluded that one can only assume that the space afforded Juanita Richardson Bay in an official Moorish science organ must have been um, commensurate with the prominence she enjoyed. These examinations of women in the MSTA suggested that the movement allowed women to express their views and contribute to the growth of the organization. These portraits of the women in the MSTA in the early days of the movement, while incomplete, emphasis their importance in temple life in Mission to America, five Islamic sectarian communities in North America. Yvonne Yasabak, Hadi, and Jane Eidelman. Smith also described women in the Moorish Science Temple by focusing on the role of women in the auxiliary organizations. Marriage, dress, Hadid and Smith like turn a point to the Moorish Sisters Auxiliary, which helped to instruct women in the proper upbringing of their children. Cooking, fundraising, and providing aid to the community. On the subject of marriage, they emphasize that Moorish Americans practice monogamy and that the union is performed by the Grand Sheik of the temple. Women in the MSCA typically wear turbans and long dresses, especially when in the temple, and cover their heads to show respect for Allah. Okay? Spencer's Drew article, Juanita Mayo, Richardson Bay, editor, educator, and poetic visionary of first generation Moorish science, examines the rule of Juanita Richardson Bay as leader of the early Moorish Science Temple of America and her work as editor and pedagogue of the movement. All right. Dew offers a close reading of a number of poems written by Richardson Bay and described her role in facilitating a literary contest in the Moorish Guide, concluding that she urged her fellow Moors to participate, pursue education, and express themselves in poems that would voice their religious experiences and belief. Dew's, ex- Dew's examination of Juanita's Richardson Bay shows that women were an integral component in the development of the Moorish Science Temple of America. He described the MSCA as one of the live religious national communities, a variety of individuals negotiating claims and practices, values and concepts, at the same time citing the work of Laurie Mafafi Kip in writing our way into history, gender, race, and the creation of Moorish denominational life and women in the 20th century. Um, Protestantism do argue that Richardson Bay worked in the guide sometimes complicated and at other moments completed with that of male colleagues, of men colleagues. So um Moabite women um are an asset to the Moorish science and they are looked upon as leaders too, not just as somebody to go in there and make meals for. Okay. So that's why the patriarch and the matriarch come together and they as one. Okay. It's not no just no matriarch rule and not no just patriarch rule. We are one. Okay. And we go with the matriarch because the matriarch, we are the protector of the matriarch. So yeah, we'll go with that, but it's still patriarch rule there too. See what I'm saying? So when we come together it's one, right? One, one. So that's why we didn't establish no polygamy because we have to establish being one first. You know what I'm saying? Now, writing in the Moorish Guide and confirms that women in Moorish science performed work that was critical to advancing the group's stated mission of the movement to uplift fallen humanity. The aim of this chapter is to add to what we know about women in the MSCA and to point out new pathway for future analysis. Despite the limited information we have on women in the MSTA, there were they were key contributors to the formation and development of the theology and culture of Moorish science. Women in the formation of the MSTA, the creation of Moorish science has mostly been attributed to the Prophet of of the group Noble Drew Ali public records filed in Cook County, Illinois, are the primary documents that detail the group's formation. There were two main affidavits filed with the country, with the county, one in November 1926 and another in July 1928. Both documents list 5 men as the persons selected as the directors to control the corporation. So on the surface, it would seem that women were not an integral part of the early establishment of the temple. However, there's a story that is circulated in the Moorish circles that suggests that was a lie. Noble Drew Ali's first convert what was a woman named Lily Sloan. Although this story is not found in any of the scholarly reports of Moorish science, it did appear in a book about the five percenters, a group founded in the 1960s by a former member of the Nation of Islam by Michael Muhammad Knight. In Knight's retelling of the story, little Sloan first learned of the prophet through a vision she had of him standing on top of a crate on a street corner calling out to her before she went to place a bet on the numbers. The underground lottery game. Sloan, who thought she was crazy and suffered from hallucinations, saw the prophet in flesh on State Street in Chicago, surrounded by a group of people who were heckling Noble Drew Ali. Once all of the people dispersed and only Lily Sloan remained, the prophet claimed to recognize her from her vision and asked her if she had a place for him to stay. That night, according to the story, Sloan became Ali's first disciple and shared her revelation with her upstairs neighbors, the Millies, who soon also joined the movement, changing their names to Millie L., who was a part of the Marcus Garvey movement, okay, and who was selected by the prophet, the Supreme Grand Sheikh, or yeah, he was the Grand Sheikh. So where the hell Kirkman Bay came from? Oh yeah, that was the schism. That was the infiltration by the feds and all that. Yeah. Okay. The story is significant as it points to the first covert of Noble Drew Ali as a woman who invited the prophet into her home, and subsequently her upstairs neighbors, the Millies, became important in the development and leadership of the group. While this story cannot be entirely corroborated by evidence, but it's corroborated. It circulated in Moorish circles, which Knight tapped into and subsequently spread to a wider audience, according to reports, because he was there. He seen it. Probably was there. He probably knew them. Probably spoke to, Miss Sloan. So, of course, he's gonna rewrite it and put it out there. Women enjoyed as equal status with men in the MSTA, and we know they held positions of leadership and were important. Okay? Women in the sacred text, the Circle 7 Quran. One of the places where the Prophet wrote most extensively about women was in the sacred text of the movement, the Circle 7 Quran. Chapters 20 through 24 dealt in some way with women. While these chapters discuss women, none of them are specifically directed at women alone. The only chapter that refers to women in its title is chapter 21, Marriage Instructions for Man and Wife from the Noble Prophet. Indeed, chapter 20, Holy Instructions and Warnings for all young men, and warn young men of the potential dangers of all the allurements of wantonness, and advises them to let not the harlot tempt thee to excess in her delights. Yet the text also proclaims that when virtue and modesty enlighten her, charms, the luster of a beautiful woman is brighter than the stars of heaven, and the influence of her power, it is in vain to resist. The message is one of both instruction and warning, declaring that young men should beware of women who are immoral, for they could sow the seeds of destruction, while women who are virtuous and pure should be pursued. Although this chapter is addressed to young men, it can also be used by young Moorish women as instruction from the prophet on how to conduct themselves according to the prophet. A woman should be pure of heart, innocent, and sweet. These characteristics are the most worthy for a young woman. So I want to, you know, go into that lesson more and, what I mean, make sure that the woman is raised up and she's lifted up, what I mean, into a position of greatness because man and woman can lead this. Now, the chapter of marriage instructions for man and wife from the noble prophet opens with direct instructions to young women, giving them ear, fair daughter of love, to the instructions of prudence, and let the precepts of truth sink deep in thy heart. So shall the charms of thy mind add luster to the elegance of thy form. This passage advised women, right, in their youth to guard their hearts against the seductions of men and to ignore their soft persuasions as they have been made man's responsible companion, not a slave of his passions. So that means you don't need to be a Jezebel. You don't need to be a whore. You don't need to be out here prostituting yourself and doing all these things. Okay, because you are more than that. And when you get with a good Moorish American man, he's going to withstill those principles in you if you are lost. That's why the prophet had the woman in his hands to bring her into solid ground. Because the woman, if she don't have a mind, then they can subjugate her. That's why they have the Moabite woman on the fez with the scimitar over her head. That's subjugation of the Moorish nation. Okay? Now, the prophet advised that submission and obedience are the lessons of her life, and peace and happiness are her reward. Through these passages, it seems that becoming a wife and mother is the optimal goal for a woman in Moorish science, especially given that the care of her family is her whole delight. To that alone she applieth her studies and elegance with frugality and seen in her mansion. Okay? Once a woman is a mother and a wife, according to the Circle 7 Quran, her life should be dedicated to the rearing of her children and management of her household. It is mentioned twice in chapter 21 that happy is the man that has made her his wife because she's going above and beyond reproach. She's teaching the children. She's not just allowing the school to teach the children. She's taking the time to teach the children this Moorish science, their principles, everything. Okay? And like I said, once Moors come together, they are one. So they are all one in thought, practices, and in study. Okay? Now, happy is the man that made her his wife. Happy the child that called her mother. The role of the woman in nation building through her development and that of her family is held in high esteem. The instructions to man include the duties of a husband regarding the treatment of the woman. The prophet in his chapter warns men, and if much of her time is destroyed in dress and adornment, if she is enumerate with her own beauty and delight with her own praise, if she laugheth much and talketh loud, if her foot abideth not in her father's house, and her eyes with boldness rove on her face of men, though her beauty were as the sun in the firmament of heaven. Turn thy face from her charms, turn thy feet from her path, and suffer not thy soul to be ensnared by the allurements of imagination. Okay? In this passage, this emphasis is placed on the negative characteristics of woman in general. According to the text, the beauty of a woman is only meaningful if she is humble. So, if you pretty, you think you all that. Oh, I'm fine. You always on Instagram. You always on Facebook. Every time you turn around, you taking pictures. You putting your ass and titties all up in this. No, 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 no. People already know you're beautiful. You don't have to do all that. Live your life accordingly of righteousness, okay? And use principles, okay? And once you understand that, then you'll have a better understanding in life, and you'll have a better understanding for self. Okay, Morris? So I wanted to make sure, make sure, Morris, I want to make sure that, you know, we get these concepts clear, and that we don't have the misconceptions anymore. Okay? Because it's a lot of misconceptions out here that these people be shaking, okay, out of nowhere and try to place upon the Moors here. Okay? So, you know, within that matter, we have to understand certain things to be true and correct. Okay? So, I want all Moors who watch this to understand that we have a big fight, and that we have to be very, very, very observative, and intellectual about how we speak, how we stay on our square, because we have a lot of people that want to debunk everything that we're saying, but that's not going to work, because we have anthropology, we have receipts on everything that we're talking about, and it can be proven. So we're not going off a pseudo nothing. Everything can be actually measured, okay? And it's actual factual. You see, and that's why the colonists don't like Moors to be out here telling the truth, because then you waking up their sheeple. They're not gonna be able to make no sheepskin coats anymore and have some lamb chops for dinner. So I want to leave you guys with that. I am Menelik Allah Al Rahim El Bey, and thank you guys for stopping and listening to this Moorish perspective, which is true in art. Islam, Moors. Peace, love, and light.